Well, thanks very much, everyone, for joining us, and welcome to this webinar on sustainable hydropower and the green recovery. I'm Eddie Rich. I'm the CEO of the International Hydropower Association. We're a membership-based organisation seeking to advance sustainable hydropower. I'm delighted to be joined by a highly distinguished panel today. We have IEA Executive Director, Dr. Fatih Birol, IRENA Director General, Francesco, and former Prime Minister of Australia, Malcolm Turnbull. Let me say a couple of things about the topic. First of all, the green recovery is obviously a timely topic. But the real point of this discussion is that there's no certain outcome for hydropower. It is ours to shape. On one hand, there's an unprecedented momentum towards energy transition. As Dr. Birol has said, the pandemic has fast-forwarded some power systems 10 years into the future with very high levels of wind and solar. We've had China setting itself a net zero target by 2060, and then President Biden enacting an executive order to rejoin the Paris Agreement on his very first day in office, plus a slew of other climate actions. Companies, including the hard-to-abate industries like transport and heat and steel production, and even the fossil fuel sector, are setting net zero policies and are looking for clean technology solutions. And Larry Fink of BlackRock is telling us that for the financial markets, green is good. In the run-up to COP26, we have never seen momentum like this. On the other hand, despite what many of us consider to be compelling evidence of its central role in providing clean energy and supporting variable renewables, there is no inevitability about hydropower being part of that journey. The green stimulus packages are heavily focused on wind and solar. Hydropower is rarely listed alongside wind and solar as the major planks of the energy transition. Investment in the sector is rarely financially enabled, and some countries don't even recognise all hydropower as renewable. Despite being the largest renewable energy source in the world and providing 96% of all energy storage, hydropower doesn't create the excitement, nor attract the R&D investment of wind, solar, hydrogen and lithium batteries. So the question today is, how can we shape this future? I plan to dive straight into a couple of rounds of conversation with our distinguished panelists, and then we'll field questions from the audience that I encourage you to drop into the chat box as we go along. Also, please tweet hashtag IHA Green Recovery. So let me first turn to Dr. Birol. IEA is, of course, the leading global organisation covering all of the energy sector. So thank you very much for joining us. We're honoured. Dr. Birol, what's your view on the world clean energy transition? And how can we make sure that hydropower, which you've called the forgotten workhorse of renewables, plays the role it should in decarbonising the world electricity mix?
Thank you, and greetings to everybody from the International Energy Agency headquarters in Paris. My special greetings to Mr. Turnbull. Very nice to see you, sir, again. And I hope you are safe in Australia and doing well. And great to see my colleague again, Francesco La Camara. We saw each other only a few weeks ago. And I am looking forward to hear the views of all the colleagues here and the viewers and to learn from them. Now, yes, I said 2 years ago, the hydropower is forgotten workhorse, because when we look at the global leaders, policy leaders, the energy industry, international summits, you rarely hear about hydropower. Yet, when you look at the numbers, you see a different thing. Hydropower is the largest, by far, the largest renewable electricity source. And there may be two reasons. One, we as the IEA don't do our pedagogical work as good as we should be doing. Or the other alternative technologies have better lobbying efforts than the hydropower. Having said that, we think hydropower needs to get the attention it deserves in the clean energy transitions if we want to be successful. So in general, I believe this year is critical, as we all know. I have three reasons. One, you just mentioned, Mr. Moderator, several countries are coming with the pledges for net zero by 2050. EU, UK, Japan, China with mid-century, and I expect very soon United States. And since we have many colleagues following us from Australia, and since we have the former Prime Minister of Australia, I would like to make my personal appeal to Australian policymakers. I would very much like to see Australia in the group of the countries who make commitments to net zero by 2050, and I hope that we can count on the great leadership in Australia in the energy circles we have seen since several decades. So this is the one reason. Governments, there's a political momentum there. The second, around the world, trillions of dollars of money is injected in the economies in the context of economic recovery packages. I see that some countries are already putting incentives, supports for hydropower. This is very good news, but we want to get more, we want to see more if we were to be successful here. And these trillions of dollars of economic recovery packages, if they want to be sustainable, they have to put money, inject money on the renewables efficiency and, of course, here hydropower. And third, COP26. It is an extremely important meeting, and I believe that the global leaders will come to Glasgow in order to come up with some, hopefully, binding roadmap for all the countries around the world, and we are working on that. Just to finish, that for us, COP26 and getting a successful outcome from there is a key priority, and we have decided and we have announced on 18th of May this year, we are going to publish the world's roadmap to net zero by 2050. And our aim is to build a wonderful bridge between Paris and Glasgow. And in that bridge, we hope to see that the Glasgow meeting is successful. As for hydropower, our this year's renewable energy market report will focus on hydropower, on which we are working with many governments and the industry stakeholders to come up with a good plan for hydropower for the new builds and also with the existing ones, whether or not they need some support. And I stop here by highlighting the critical importance of 2021 and what are the reasons behind that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Birol. We seem to say that every year that this is the critical year, but I mean, you have set out a very clear set of objectives for that roadmap between Paris and Glasgow, and we're particularly pleased to see you focusing on hydropower in the renewable energy markets report, which come out in June. Is that right? The report. Yes. We're as you know, delighted to be working with you in any way we can to support you in that very important milestone report. Let me turn next to Director General of Camera. First of all, let's acknowledge today that IRENA and IHA signed a memorandum of understanding covering a plan of work together, including exploring many of the issues that we're covering today, and particularly the role of pump storage. Thank you for that. Let me ask you about the role of hydropower alongside other renewables. Your Global Renewables Outlook 2020 says hydropower capacity will have to grow by 850 gigawatts by 2050. How can we get policymakers to understand the whole system benefits rather than just looking at levelized costs of energy?
So thank you very much, Fatih, for your question. And allow me at the start to send my greetings to Fatih, to Mr. Malcolm Turnbull, to all the old and new friends. It's really a pleasure being with you today. Also in the day that we signed this agreement with the International Hydropower Association. So yes, indeed, we in our global renewable outlook last year, we make clear that we need to reach 2,150 gigawatts by 2050. That is a 65% increase from today's capacity. And although we have a sizable a list of projects, roughly 608 gigawatts, that is already in place, we have also to consider that we have a global hydro fleet that is a considerable age. So we have to make a big effort to stay in line with our roadmap. And this map will be no really changing. And in the occasion that we are going in the occasion of the Berlin Energy Transition Dialogue, our World Energy Transition Outlook and the role of hydropower will be absolutely there. Possibly you may remember that when I start, in fact, before starting, when I present my candidature, my vision to the General Assembly, I posed the focus on how important hydropower is and how the importance of hydropower goes beyond power generation and cost of electricity. When we talk about carbon neutrality or 100% renewables, it's not by chance that the country that are already very close or very advanced to reach this objective are countries where hydropower is there. Because it's not just to provide electricity, and as has been brilliantly pointed out by Fatih, is the most important sector in the renewable field. But it's because it's providing also flexibility and these balancing services that enable penetration of high amount of variable renewables. So this is as to what we have to make clear in the way to Glasgow, and also in the way of the energy transition dialogue that will take place in New York in September this year. That is a very important dialogue because I think it's the after 50 years that the UN Secretary General has called a dialogue like this. And there are also other services that the hydropower may provide in terms of increasing resilience to floods and drought that are caused by climate change. So there are more roles of the hydropower. Naturally, the fact is that this, in some way, the fact that it's more and more integrated into the energy system is changing a little bit the operation regime of hydropower, because its contribution to the grid in terms of flexibility and interconnectivity is adding more value to the benefit of going for hydropower. And this fact is that this change in operating regime and some of these services are not adequately remunerated. So it's important that in building the sense of how important hydropower is that we found a way for these services to be paid in some way and having a value for the producer. So the most important thing that we have to transmit in all the work we are going to present is making clear that it's not just producing electricity, is making the clean energy system working effectively. So this is important. Policymakers has to understand this very clearly. What we did as IRENA is to launch this collaborative framework that, in my point of view, are important because a forum where we are able to bring together the companies and the governments. So it's important that we can share experience and try to identify what we can do for doing better. So what could be done for this cover the financing, the flexibility, the resilience and sustainability. All this may be discussed in this collaborative framework. And it's also important to understand that the level, also the General Assembly asked to have this collaborative framework at the ministerial level. So this is the sense that the uniqueness to put together private companies, government, association is the way to make the raising the attention to the role of the hydropower, not only as producer, but as a component for a clean energy system that can be stable, interconnected, and flexible. And as you say, I'm very glad that today we have finalized this our work in establishing this special working context between IRENA and the International Hydropower Association. This could be meaning be part of our work on all the elements, be part of our progress in setting the path for the carbon neutral in 2050. So ready to work together again and waiting for your further demand. Thank you very much, Eddie.
Thank you, Francesco. The collaborative framework on hydropower, which you've talked about, which so far I think has 49 countries involved, I think that will be very key. With the timing of IEA's Renewable Energy Market Report and work that I hope we're doing with you and the World Bank and others to identify where is that going to be that 850 gigawatt of new hydropower capacity, where's that coming from, and looking at those issues of modernization of existing plants. I think we really need to explore that. When it comes to that question of the clean energy transition and the role of hydropower, we play around with this idea in the office here, that if it were a football team, the clean energy transition were a football, and sorry to Malcolm to translate for you, soccer. If it was you have wind and you have solar as your strikers up front, you have your conventional hydro as the playmaking central midfielder supporting the strikers, keeping the whole system together, and then you have pumped storage. Either, we haven't worked it out, either it's a goalkeeper, making sure that you don't have any blackouts, or it's some kind of super sub that can come on and play for anybody up on the pitch who's not performing. Anyway, I'll leave you with that. Malcolm, let me turn to you. And thanks for joining us. It's late in the evening there in Australia. Look, what got you first interested in hydropower, and how did you get the rest of your government and the companies on side?
Well, look, I spent a summer, actually, the summer of 2016-17, over the Christmas period, thinking very deeply about the energy transition. And as I reflected on it more deeply, it became obvious that we were rolling out very rapidly a lot of variable renewable energy, that it was getting cheaper, both on a cost per watt basis and also as financing costs reduced. So the LCOE of renewable energy was coming down all the time. But while it was very easy to roll it out, we weren't giving enough attention to the storage and firming. And there was a sort of a breezy assumption, I think, abroad that had been that there'll always be gas peakers to pick up the slack. And that's clearly wasn't right from a climate point of view, wasn't right from a cost point of view. And so I became very interested in pumped storage. And I was helped by a number of people in the industry in Australia, and in particular by one of our leading scholars at the Australian National University, Andrew Blakers, who'd done quite a lot of work on it. And so I announced at the beginning of that the following year a pumped hydro agenda. And as you know, quickly after that, we agreed to do the Snowy Hydro 2.0 expansion, which will be the largest pumped hydro scheme in the Southern Hemisphere, 2,000 megawatts, with the ability to go to 8,000 megawatts. And a similar concept in Tasmania with its hydro scheme, which is called more generally the battery of the nation. But the reality is that there is a fundamental mismatch in timing, and this is something that I think very few people in government fully appreciate. If you have your planning permits lined up, you can build a big solar farm in months, not years, months. But if you want to build a pumped storage scheme, even if you have two existing reservoirs at differing elevations, it is going to take you years because there is a lot of steel and concrete and planning and environmental analysis and engineering. And so my anxiety is that we are not doing enough in hydro because we are sort of in a kind of blissful state of self-delusion, rolling out variable renewables on the assumption that something, like Mr. McCorber will turn up. But we've got to plan it. So, I used to say when I was in office that our energy, and Fatih remembers this very well, we used to discuss it, that our energy policy should be determined by engineering and economics, not ideology and idiocy. And regrettably, there's too much of the latter. So I think I really welcome the opportunity to be with you today. I think hydropower is the forgotten workhorse, but I think the problem is that it's a workhorse that takes a bit longer to get onto the paddock than a wind farm or a solar panel. And so if we want to have that capacity for long duration storage, we've got to get on with it. And just picking up what Francesco said, we've also got to make sure that we have the mechanisms to reward developers for doing so. Now, Snowy 2 is a Commonwealth, Australian government-owned project, but we've got to have mechanisms that will, in effect, pay for that big, long-term seasonal storage capacity to encourage developers to get on with it. And look, you all know much more about this area than me, I'm sure, but I think it is it's just a critical, urgent priority to get cracking.
Thanks, Malcolm. And that's really, that sense of urgency is really key here, because we talked about the 850 gigawatts in 50 years. At the same time, we have a lot of these plants over 30, 40 years old. They're going to need to be updated, replaced. That will actually, if it's done, will increase capacity, but it will. It's also further works that need planning. We're behind the curve here. That segues neatly into Dr. Birol, what I want to ask you. We've talked about all of us here, the value of hydropower to boost the variable renewables through its flexibility and storage. IEA Sustainable Development Scenario calls for a doubling of investment in sustainable hydropower, but it's not happening. Why is it not happening?
I think, first of all, we should see that the clean energy transitions will not happen if everything is left to markets as they are today. There is a need to provide incentives from government's side in order to have a clean energy transition which is secure and affordable at the same time. And when we look at the role of hydropower, it makes a lot of things. Not only generates electricity without emissions, but it also, irrigation is one of them. Flooding issue is another one, and is both Mr. Turnbull and Francesco mentioned, playing a role in terms of flexibility. So what needs to happen? In my view, many things, but one of them I want to underline, which is to value the service that the hydropower, including the pump hydro, provides. Without giving a value, without the remuneration, we will not see major developments happening here. The second reason why it is not happening much or as much as we would like to see is the bulk of the potential is in the emerging world, in the developing countries, in Asia, Latin America, and elsewhere. And we are unfortunately seeing that the capital is not going in those countries for clean energy transition as much as it needs to go. So therefore, if you ask me, in the whole clean energy and climate debate, one nerve center, it is how to finance clean energy in the emerging countries. The emissions growth is coming mainly from the emerging world. But the flow of capital for green energy to those countries is very, very limited. How to find a way to bring a significant amount of investments there is, in my view, critical, and this will not happen, once again, if we leave everything to the forces of market, and there is a need, maybe creating new international financial mechanisms in order to support the clean energy investment in the emerging world. It is the reason why International Energy Agency, World Bank, and the World Economic Forum Davos brought forces together, coming up with a report, Financing Clean Energy Investments in the Emerging World, to be published in the World Economic Forum annual meeting, bringing many financial institutions internationally and regionally. What kind of policies domestically and internationally we can suggest so that we can debottleneck, open the doors for the investments going in the developing worlds. Today, the investments going in the Switzerland or Norway or Australia, these are good. But when you look at the global scale, this will not change the trends. Therefore, key issues, investments, clean investments in the emerging world, and hydropower potential is huge in many of those countries, as we all know, both mini hydro, but also large hydro applications, helping serving many, many purposes. Thank you.
Yeah, I think you raised an important point. We were in for our board meeting exactly a year ago in Africa, and that's a continent which has only exploited about 10% of its hydropower capacity. So we can talk a lot in some regions about the need for modernization, for pump storage, for retrofitting existing dams. But then you have large parts of the world where there isn't the investment in the greenfield in the first place, and getting that balance is very difficult. It brings me on to the question actually I wanted to ask Francesco about the sustainability questions. I mean, these are big infrastructure projects. We're looking at ahead to a world where there's going to be a lot more energy infrastructure. How can all the players in the energy system work together to minimize their overall environmental and social impact and create a sustainable energy system with benefits for all stakeholders?
Absolutely, very good question, Eddie. But first of all, thanks, because in your, how to say, comparison between the role of hydropower and in a soccer team, I discovered that when I was playing football, and I play in the professional team of my country, Reggio Calabria, the Regina, was in the second division at the time, I was playing the role of hydropower. So good to know that. And
conventional. You were central midfielder. It's central midfield, yeah, right? Playmaker.
They consider that I should use the brain, so that's and something that I'm trying to do anytime anyway. And absolutely, Fatih is correct to say that that the market alone cannot solve our way forward. And the idea of the externality, you know, always when in the past talking about dams and other, the externalities were associated always to negative impact of the plant, of the activities. But we have also the case when we develop an initiative, building a new facilities, we may have also positive externalities. So it's important from the beginning that in the planning, we always have to think not to the single plant, but we have to thinking about the whole system and present the proposed plant in a more wide context. So in a planning context where the different benefits that may come from and the cost coming from the projects may be in some way balanced and make clear to the population the potential long-term impact of the plants in terms of resilience, in terms of reducing risk of emergency event. So it's equally important to ensure participation of all stakeholders, but what is important to do is to do in a planning stage. So where all the aspects can be taken into account. So make it clear how the initiative is in the general context of ensuring the energy transition happening and all the other benefits as a regulation of the flood and the drought and also. Second, and on this I think the association is working well, is the establishment of a sustainability standard. So that can be in some way recognized as a first measure of the sustainability of the plant. And I think you have done an excellent work with your hydropower sustainability tools, and also these ongoing efforts to create an hydropower sustainability standard. And all these, I think, aspects that we can work together. Another aspect could be also trying to standardize in some way some component of the plant design. That this is possible given the site-specific nature of a hydropower plant. So that in some way could be the perspective of a modular, a standardized way to ensure both environmental sustainability and cost competitiveness. So this could be also a way to catalyze great growth for the sector, and naturally exploring alternate business model. This is absolutely important if we want to develop, maybe recognize and receive values from what they offer to the community. Another way could be also trying to make the benefit coming from the projects owned by the community. We have a clear example in Denmark, and this could be replicated in other areas. But naturally, still much has to be done in making the matching between the project and the financial resources. On this aspect, I hope that the climate investment platform that we have established, and we have received already almost 200 projects, and we are ready to work with the association on trying to understand through the investment forum how we can match the demand and supply of financial resources. I think that everyone has to recognize that if you want to accelerate the energy transition, if you want to get a cleaner energy system, hydropower has to play one of the main role in the family of renewables.
Yeah, I mean, I think one thing that we need to acknowledge is hydropower's been around a long time compared to the other renewables, and we've learned lessons the whole way. We haven't always been a beautiful sector. We need to acknowledge that. We've working very hard with NGOs, social and environmental, and with governments to try and establish the standard that we hope to launch soon, and the tools that we've been using for quite some time. And as far as I'm concerned, there is no excuse in 2021 for any hydropower project not to meet good practice in terms of environmental, social.
You know, Eddie, in my previous life, many years ago, I've been leading the group that was writing the environmental impact assessment regulation in Italy. And I know how important is it to set standards that may be recognized by the population. So if you are able to come with this, I think this will help very much the discussion, and absolutely making clear the role of hydropower in the general context. So never afford the discussion on plant by plant, but making clear the linkage with all the reality of the energy transition.
Yeah. Dr. Birol, you just launched last week a global commission on people-centered clean energy transitions. Do you want to say anything about that at this point?
Yes, of course. Clean energy transition is going very strongly around the world, but it may have implications for some communities, for some societies. For example, again, let's take India. Okay, in India today, coal is the #1 employer of the people. Millions of families are getting their income through the coal industry, either coal industry directly or to the railways of India. And the railways of India's #1 job is carry Indian coal. So if the coal is out in India, okay, it's a serious issue. What will happen with those families? Just in a few hours, I am going to testify in the United States Senate Energy Committee on this very issue. In the United States, this is a very important issue as well. What happens with the clean energy transition to the communities, societies which are relying on the fossil fuels? So therefore, we said we bring the wise men and women around the world, which is headed by the Prime Minister of Denmark, Mrs. Mette Frederiksen, and several ministers from Europe, Mexico, Indonesia, around the world, to come up before the COP26 with some recommendations, learning from each other's experience. For example, Canada made a lot of good efforts there, or Spain. Those ministers will give their suggestions to each other and to the rest of the world for COP26, so that the clean energy transitions are people-centered transitions, and they are more successful. And otherwise, if those transitions are not people-centered, if they have implications for the energy security, or if they are not affordable for the citizens, I am sure we may see some delays in the clean energy transitions. It is the reason why we have put this commission together. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Birol. And let me say for the record that we'd be very pleased to be able to support the commission from the experience from the hydropower sector. Malcolm, if I may, we've got a big question ahead now. We've got the post-COVID era. We've got all these significant economic stimulus packages, not only between renewable energy sources, but also storage solutions like conventional and pumped hydro, batteries and hydrogen. How is it that we should be best engaging with governments from your experience to get hydropower onto this green recovery agenda?
Well, I think we've got to stress the urgency factor. We've got to make sure that people understand what pumped hydro is. It had in fact largely been forgotten. until very recently, because you know, there'd been no new pumped hydro built in Australia for well over 50 years, if not longer. So and similar pattern around the world. Now, the factors that drove pump storage, of course, were continuous generators like thermal, you know, burning coal, but particularly nuclear power stations, which could use excess power at night to pump water uphill and then create a variable generator with the hydro during the day. The grid, both supply and demand characteristics changed, and pump storage wasn't so much in demand, but it's now absolutely critical. So I think you've got to re-educate people. And the other thing that's factored in, I think, Eddie, is there are basic things we've got to get across. Is, you know, people will say, oh, but you use more megawatt hours to get the water up the hill than you generate than when it comes down. And you say, yeah, well, sure, that's absolutely right. But has it occurred to you that it's not the same price? The electrons are not the same price going up as they are coming down. And, you know, little basic things like that. So we've got to explain it. I think we've also got to recognize that we can have hydro we don't have to have mega, you know, gigantic dams, you know, like the Aswan Dam, or, you know, the Three Gorges Dam and so forth. You don't have to have gigantic dams on huge rivers to generate hydroelectricity. You know, there are many, and I, you know, want to compliment the IHA for the way it's promoted smarter, more sustainable approaches to on-river hydro. But of course, there's a lot of huge opportunities for off-river hydro now, particularly in the pump storage area. So the fact is that, you know, there are three, I think at least three big techniques for storing electricity, and that's critically what we need. Pumped storage is a very well understood, very well proven technique. You've got batteries, which are expensive, have a relatively short life, and, you know, on the sort of scale where you aren't really able to compete at the scale we're talking about with big pumped hydro projects. And then, of course, you've got green hydrogen, which is, you know, I think will play a gigantic part in the future, but is still some way off. So, you know, any prudent government its approach to the energy transition should be an all of the above approach. You know, you shouldn't be sort of saying, oh, you know, this is better than that. Make sure you're doing everything, and above all, you know, recognize that you have to get on with it. I mean, that's my single biggest concern with hydro. We've got to generate, excuse the pun, a sense of urgency, because otherwise, you know, because we're dealing with the incoming factors of generation, which are, if you like, creating the demand for pump storage, can be built in months, whereas the storage capability, if it's pump storage, requires years, and that means you have to plan ahead.
Well, I would support what Mr. Turnbull said. I think it's a very important point. I think one issue I said IEA was not maybe able to give enough pedagogical support to policymakers, so they forgot hydropower. Another thing is that we will try to make the people understand to have 2050 net zero target, to set this target, many countries are doing, and citizens want to see, we want to see, is not the difficult part of the story. Difficult part of the story is how to make it happen, and with a secure way, in an affordable way. So it will not happen with angry tweets or with making some strong statements, sharp statements. It needs a very well thought, cool-headed design of the energy systems. So it is the reason, and we are looking at the numbers now. it requires Herculean efforts if we have any chance to reach there. And therefore, to exclude any clean energy technologies out of the picture because I don't like it, because it's not in my portfolio, in my view, is a very, very luxurious way to look at it. We need all clean energy technologies, full stop. We may like some of them, we may not like the others. It goes from hydro to solar, solar to wind, wind to offshore, offshore to CCUS, from CCUS to efficiency, and all of them. Because it is not, I don't like this technology, is people want to stick to those technologies that they like. I mean, this is not a way to go. I think it is, the issue is not to boost our egos, but to reduce the emissions. So therefore, I think we have to look at all clean energy technologies. And here, I would like to support what Mr. Turnbull said. All the technologies we need to look at carefully. Thank you.
And from our side, let's be absolutely clear. This is no beauty contest, right? We need all of these technologies. This isn't a matter of which one is prettier in which point. It's overall, they all serve different roles and can support each other in different ways. I mean, on that point, we've got an interesting comment here from Wolfgang Richter, who says hydropower and pumped storage are forever assets with an extremely long lifetime. Thus, it's hard to compare with other technologies. It's more accurate to talk about investments rather than costs. And I mean, I think that helpfully sort of distinguishes sort of how we should think about all of these technologies serving different kind of functions in the system. And of course, that's very much why we, with the US Department for Energy, set up the International Forum on Pumped Storage, which both IRENA and IEA are involved in, and Malcolm Turnbull gave the launch address to. And we encourage people to get involved in that, looking at some of the solutions to these questions that have been raised. We've got about just under 10 minutes to look at some of these interesting questions that have come in. Can I pick out just a few of them? And I do apologise to people who sent in some really good questions. It's an hour, we don't have time to go over all of them. Mr. Mashingwaze says, the key issue for hydro will continue to be that it's more expensive compared to solar and wind at the moment. With other storage options becoming cheaper, what can be done to reduce the cost of hydro? And that picks up on some of the points Dr. Birol was talking about, but perhaps I want to drop that with the panel and perhaps a couple of other points if you want to pick up. Our friend Junhua Meng from WWF makes a reminder that in fact, rivers and fresh water systems are also workhorses. They are facing overexploitation and species loss. So we need sustainable and low conflict schemes to be part of the energy future. So the investments need to be steered in that way. So again, pick up on some of those sustainability questions. Can I also just refer to Pamela Stenger-Tiedeke, who was interested to consider how hydropower assets can be effectively combined with other renewables, for example, used in hybrid systems. And I think this is the key point. Hybrid systems, how can policy consider the question of promoting of hydro? And I think here we've made reference to floating solar and other opportunities which really build other opportunities on top of hydropower. Let me leave it there and turn back to the panel if they want to pick up on any of those issues. Malcolm, can I turn to you first of all?
Well, look, just on the question of cost, you know, again, it's not a sort of an either or thing, but if you look at the capabilities of Snowy 2, which will enable, you know, that system, Snowy 2 will enable you to deliver 2,000 megawatts for 7.5 days without repumping. that sort of storage, energy storage, were it be done by batteries, Snowy Hydro estimated would cost, at the prices then available a year or so ago, about $180 billion, which is, versus a bill of, about $4 billion to build Snowy 2. So I think, for very large scale, long run storage, pumped storage still has a great advantage. And as your first commentator observed, it lasts forever. I mean, it will be there forever. This is where we've got to think very deeply about the advantages of pumped storage and off-river hydro, off-river pumped storage, because then you can get away, if you're just using your two reservoirs in a thoroughly circular fashion, you get away from all of these, environmental issues that I think your third participant was commenting on in terms of affecting streams and, aquatic life and so forth. So it's, unfortunately, because we're all fascinated by the magnificence of, the Hoover Dam wall and, the Three Gorges and all that sort of thing, there's a tendency to think that all hydro looks like that. And while it has those structures have an incredible heroic nature to them, that's not how hydroelectric schemes of any kind have to be and aren't. And in particular, we can do it in a much more modular and a way that absolutely supports variable renewable energy.
Francesco, do you want to pick up on any of these?
I think that I think Mr. Turnbull respond to all the questions that has been posed. That first of all, I think it's a big mistake, if I can say very bluntly, that we consider the cost of energy just confronting the levelized cost of energy. This is not possible to apply to hydropower because it doesn't take into account all the services that hydropower may provide. Hydropower may provide the possibility to have more renewables into this system. Yeah. Hydropower may provide for ensure interconnectivity. Hydropower may provide for flexibility. So hydropower may provide for having a cleaner energy system in place. And this is not in the levelized cost of energy. And then the other aspect, as has been said, we have not only to think about the big dam, but also having other way to have a dysfunction of storage be there when we talk about hydro. There are also hybrid solutions that I think there has been an auction already in India, where and being successful in having this hybrid solution, solar and hydro, wind and hydro. So the way also to ensure floating and others. So looking at all this panorama, we have to look to all this panorama where we decide the economic value of hydropower.
Thank you. Thank you. Dr. Birol.
So I think both Mr. Turnbull and Mr. Camara gave excellent answers. I want to just use this 1 minute to highlight one issue which we perhaps didn't emphasize enough, and I don't want this to be go unnoticed. Yes, we should be worried, push building new hydropower, pumped hydro and the others for different reasons, from electricity generation to flexibility and the others. But there is another issue, and we are going to look at it one by one in our hydropower emphasis renewable market report. This is the aging of the existing hydropower plants in the advanced economies. And this is, they need help. They need refurbishment. And if it is not done, we may well lose one of the mainstays of the clean energy transitions. Therefore, we have two jobs: building financing new hydropower projects. And second, we have to put money for the refurbishment of the existing hydropower assets we have around the world. How much will it be? And how urgent it is will be highlighted in the report of the IEA coming very soon. And I think this is another issue that we shouldn't lose sight of. Thank you.
Yeah, so perhaps, I mean, that's a very key point, that we can perhaps take away these sort of 4 areas which surely low controversy we can move ahead with right away. One is the refurbishment of the aging plants and maximizing, optimizing their generation capacity. This is surely is an easy win. There's huge potential to retrofit existing dams that don't have hydropower facilities, and that is the vast majority globally. I mean, in the US, it's only 3% of dams that have that are electrofitted. We have some mega potential on off-river pumped storage hydro, as has been discussed, and also there is some potential for hybrid solutions, and these are surely areas that we can move on with. Look, we got 3 minutes left. I want to turn to each one of you for 1 minute sort of takeaway summary. I just to pique your provoke a response. There have been lots of other comments and questions coming in, and apologies to people, but perhaps some things to take in. Some people asking about specific government actions, one specific government action in the next year. Some people talking about where would you prioritize the pipeline? How would you do that? Some people asking about one key thing on public perception of hydropower. And finally, any ideas on sources, specific sources for finance. Let me turn to Francesco first of all, then to Malcolm, and then finish with Dr. Birol.
So if I can very briefly, 2 takeaway. One, that's when we talk about hydropower, we have not to consider the plant one by one, but looking at the contribution of the hydropower to the energy system. One. Second, naturally, in the energy transition, we'll have jobs moving from the fossil fuel to the fossil fuel energy system into a cleaner one. But it is not meaning loss of job. We have demonstrated in our agenda, post-COVID agenda, as if we go for accelerating energy transition in the next 3 years, we will have another jobs of 5.5. And we have also indicated policies to make this possible. So they make the jobs going from the old sectors to the new one. Concerning the financial, that this is more than 1 minute, so I think I will stop here. The only thing that we can say we are trying to do, and I repeat, is this our initiative on the climate investment platform, and naturally Africa, as easier, will have the priority in our work, trying to matching the financial resources with the project. We have already 108 bankable projects listed, so I hope this can make a contribution to the global agenda.
Thank you so much, Francesco. So, Malcolm.
Look, I agree with everything Francesco just said. Just on the financing, I think that one of the ways we can, I mean, obviously governments can provide support, and that's an obvious way, and that's what Dr. Birol sort of canvassed, and certainly what I did in Australia. But you know, I think one of the things that's not well understood is really the last point that Francesco made, which was the value that hydro, particularly pumped hydro, brings in terms of all of those ancillary services, what we call in Australia FCAS, particularly, you know, maintenance of inertia, maintenance of frequency, all of that support for the grid that you can deliver best by having a big synchronous spinning machine, which of course is what a hydro turbine is. So you know, this is, people are only just starting to get their head around this, and I just give you as an example, you know, well, obviously you could look at the money that hydro generators make out of that area, but some of them are not, even the incredibly open members of IHA, Eddie, sometimes are a bit circumspect about how they generate their revenues. But the Horndale battery in South Australia, which you may remember was a very large battery installed, I think in 2017, that has been a hugely profitable exercise, and overwhelmingly it's made its money not out of arbitrage, not out of, you know, buying cheap electrons and selling dear electrons, but out of all of those frequency and other, you know, ancillary services. So, you know, there's a lot of lines of revenue, and I think the better that that's understood, the more likely you'll get financiers to recognise that and you know, underwrite projects in return for being able to access those you know, unconventional, I guess, revenues in the future.
Thanks, Malcolm. Good message there for our own members. Dr. Birol.
I agree everything what Mr. Lacamera and Mr. Turnbull said. I just wanted to add that if the governments are serious about the clean energy transitions, it will not happen, at least in a timely manner, in the absence of putting a lot of emphasis on hydropower. So therefore, in my view, recovery packages, trillions of dollars of recovery packages putting on the table should give incentives to hydropower, both in terms of the new builds and also the existing ones, refurbishment, as they will provide value added for the economy and creates lots of jobs that we need a lot today. And let's all work together that this workhorse is not forgotten anymore. Thank you.
Thank you. That's excellent note to finish on, and thanks for mentioning the jobs element of this. It's frustrating. We've run out of time. You can keep the conversation going on Twitter. Please do hashtag Sustainable Hydropower and IHA Green Recovery, and please do loop us in at IHA_org. Thanks so much. The full video will appear on www.hydropower.org later on today, where you can also find out more about IHA, how to get involved, not just for companies, for all other stakeholders as well, and also about the World Hydropower Congress in September, where many of these things that you've heard about will come together in a more long-term explorative way, and that will be a few weeks before COP26, so an excellent milestone for trying to get some messages across to the wider community. Thanks again to our excellent and distinguished panelists. Thank you for your time and involvement. We hope to see you all again soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Ciao Heidi, ciao Fatih, ciao Malcolm. See you next.
Good night. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.